But after I wrote it and handed it out to my students, they were like, that was super helpful, thank you so much. So then I was like, oh. Yeah. So, I think it's helpful for you to kind of see the formatting. I do have a blank outline that is on Top Hat that you can go in and look at. But this is what, if you were handing an outline in to me, this is what I would want it to look like, formatting-wise, title, stuff at the top, okay? So you can kind of look at that as we go over Chapter 3 today, which is speech development. So when I start the chapter, you know I like to start with a question, and that question is, do I have to do it this way? Okay? A lot of people ask me this question all the time about writing a speech outline. Do I have to do it just like this? Yes, you do. Okay? Because I'm not creating an outline that I like. This is what communication scholars believe to be the best way to write a speech. Okay? So yes, you need to do it like this. Think about it as if you were building a house. You don't want to build a house with a kind of faulty foundation, because then everything in your house is not so good. And so that's why we want a good, strong outline, because then our speech has a better chance of being really strong too. Okay? So yes, I want you to do it just like this. So before we talk about creating a speech, we need to talk about modes of delivery. Anytime you give a speech, there's 4 ways that you could deliver it. Okay? The first one is manuscript. So the manuscript speech is where you write your speech out word for word, and then you stand up in front of an audience and you read it. You might see these speeches like in high school, the valedictory address, right? They write it out and then they say that speech word for word. A lot of times speeches that are on TV are manuscript speeches. You just don't see them read it because they're reading a teleprompter, but they're still reading the speech word for word. We don't do manuscript speeches in here because manuscript speeches are extremely difficult. They take a long time to write, and then whenever you give that speech, it's very hard to give a speech that you are reading and make it not sound like you're reading, right? We don't want it to sound robotic. We don't want it stiff and wooden. We want it to have some charisma. We want it to have some excitement, and so we don't do a manuscript speech. So I'm never going to ask you to write your speech out word for word. It's extremely time-consuming. The second type is a memorized speech, and a memorized speech is even more time-consuming than a manuscript, because a manuscript you're writing out word for word. A memorized speech you're writing it out word for word, and then you're memorizing it word for word. Okay, so it takes double or triple the time to do. And if you've ever memorized something, if you're going along saying that memorized whatever, and then you forget one word or phrase in the middle of it, what happens?
You have to freeze up.
Everything's gone, right? Like you cannot, you're like, okay, it's like you can't get past that part, right? Plus, for a lot of people, memorization is really difficult, and especially words like that. So think about how long it would take you to write out word for word a 5-minute speech and then also memorize that speech exactly that way. It's very difficult. And again, you'll memorize it in a very specific way, and then that's the way you'll deliver it. So if you've memorized it in kind of a stiff wooden way, you would deliver it in that same way. The impromptu speech is a speech that you actually have 0 time to prepare, or very little time to prepare. You often don't know the topic ahead of time, and you're kind of just delivering this speech on the fly. We are actually going to give one impromptu speech in here, okay? It sounds really scary, but once you know the organization of a speech, it's not as hard as it seems. And the reason that we're actually going to practice it is because you may, in your lifetime, give more impromptu speeches than anything else. Okay? Say you go into your boss's office and they're talking to you about your year-end review, and you're like, that's awesome, you know, they're saying you're doing so good, and they're like, but we're not going to give you a raise this year. And you think you deserve a raise. So you would have an opportunity to jump into an impromptu speech about, but here are 3 reasons why I do believe that I should get a raise this year. Okay? So even though you don't think, like, I would never give an impromptu speech, that's actually the speech that you would give the most, right? It just may not be in a quote-unquote speech setting, right? But the majority of our speeches in here will be extemporaneous. Extemporaneous in speech class means planned, prepared, and spoken from notes. You know what your topic is, you know what you're going to do to plan it, you know you have time to plan it, you're going to prepare it, you're going to write that outline, you're going to practice it, and then you're going to have notes that you are going to speak from. Okay? They're not going to be written out word for word, you know, sheets in front of you, but you are going to have note cards so that you can refer back to what do I need to say. Okay? So we are going to give extemporaneous speeches in here for the most part, 3 out of our 4 speeches. Okay. when we start to write our speech, a lot of people think that we start with the topic, but that is actually not how you start writing a speech. Anytime you start writing a speech, you will start with your audience. You're going to do audience analysis first. Audience analysis is the process of gathering information and data about the audience to which you'll be speaking with the intent of adapting your message to that specific audience. Okay? That's your goal. Audience analysis is really important because if I ask Norma to come in here and give a speech about nursing, she could probably do that pretty easy, right? But what if when she showed up to give the speech, the room was full of kindergartners? Well, that's going to be a different type of speech than if it's to college students, right? So we have to know who our audience is. Knowing that audience is going to help us know how we should adapt that speech so that the audience gets the most out of it, okay? So it's always the very first thing you do when preparing a speech. You might want to write that down or highlight it because that's going to be an exam question. What's the very first thing you do when you prepare a speech? And the answer is audience analysis. So when you start audience analysis, there's several different ways you can do it. The first way, you can interview an informant. That should say an informant, not and. But your informant is probably going to be whoever asked you to give the speech, okay? So normally you don't just find, like, there's someone who says, hey, will you give a speech here at this time to do this, right? Whoever that person is, you're going to ask them some questions, okay? So when I first got hired at South Plains College, I was asked to be the keynote speaker at the Phi Theta Kappa induction. So the faculty member that asked me, she was my informant. So I asked her some questions, like how many people are going to be there, who is going to be there, what kind of things are you really thinking I might want to talk about? Like, do you have an idea about the topic? How much time do I have to speak? And all of that stuff helps me figure out what my topic needs to be, how I need to approach the audience. So there was going to be about 50 to 60 people there. It was going to be Phi Theta Kappa inductees and their family members, okay? So it could be kids, could be older, people. It's all age ranges, basically. And it's the Phi Theta Kappa induction, so it's the National Honor Society for Junior Colleges. So the topic, I felt like, should be something about education or learning or like how higher ed can help us in a lot of different ways. And so from there, then I was able to kind of start creating and preparing a speech. You can also do some direct observation. So direct observation is kind of what I've been doing for you all semester long, right? We sat down at the very beginning, I'm like, okay, tell me about yourself, right? The more information you give us, the more we know who our audience is, because in this class, this is your audience, right? This is it, okay? So if you know more about them, then that is going to help you know how to create a speech that's going to appeal to them, right? So in the very beginning, I asked everybody where they're from, asked them what their major is, asked them how they felt about public speaking. We've talked about favorite movies, favorite books, favorite food. That's all audience information, right? The other thing that you can do is gather demographic information, okay? So demographic data is things like age, ethnicity, gender, education level, job history, socioeconomic status. All of that stuff tells us about the audience, right? And so I actually have a demographic survey that I have you fill out on Top Hat, and that's an assignment, right? So if you've looked at that assignment, I ask a bunch of personal questions, like, what is your job? What do your parents do? Do you have siblings? Are you the oldest, the middle, the youngest? Do you have kids of your own? How old are they? How many do you have? What jobs have you had? Where do you want to travel? What are things you're interested in? I ask you all these questions, right? Because then when our students come to me and say, I don't really know what to talk about. And I say, well, what if you talked about this? No. What about this? No. I can say, why don't you go to the discussion board where everybody said, here's 3 topics I want to hear, and here's 3 topics I don't want to hear, right? And that will help you kind of with your topic selection, okay? So you can gather that demographic data, or you can do surveys and questionnaires. I've had students before who come to me and say, hey, I want to talk about this, and I'll say, okay, that's a great topic, but I don't know that your audience knows about that topic. You know, that might be too hard for your audience. So I'll say, why don't you do a survey or a questionnaire and ask them, like, how much do you know about this topic? Is this something that you're familiar with, right? Because when you're thinking about a topic, I like to kind of pick on my livestock judging students, and I actually don't have any this semester. I usually have a bunch. But they come in and their whole life is agriculture, right? Their whole life is about stock show and judging meat and animals. And they come in here and they give their speeches and they act like we all know all of the terminology that goes into stock showing. And I know because my brother did it and I grew up on a farm, but like my students from other places in the world are like, I'm confused. What are you showing? Well, you're showing the animal how to do what, right? Like, it's a very confusing concept. And when they start to talk about the jargon, right? So then you're going to wash your steer, and then you're going to put them in the cold box so that the hair stands up, and everybody's like, what are you doing? It's very confusing, right? And so you have to know, like, where does my audience, what information do they already know, and what information can I build on? Or do I need to go back to the very beginning and explain a lot of things in the speech, okay? So audience analysis is important, and it's the very first thing we do. You're a little bit spoiled in the classroom because this is your audience. They can't leave. They're what we call a captive audience, right? They're captive because they're here, right? It's part of your grade. And also, because in this class, I do really care more that you pick something that you really love than that you pick something that appeals to all of us. Okay, so I'd much rather you pick a topic that you're super interested in than a topic that you think we're interested in but you're bored with. Because if you're bored with it, you're going to sound bored with it. Okay, so I'd rather have the student who got up here and gave a whole speech about trading cards that were different characters that I didn't really understand, but he was super excited about it. I would rather you be that student than the student who got up here and gave a speech that would have appealed to the whole audience, but they didn't care about it, right? And so they were bored and sounded bored.
Potatoes.
Potatoes. Actually, I love potatoes, so I could get on board with that. I can pretty much get on board with every topic that you say. Like, there's never been a topic that I was like, there's been topics that I get bored with because I've heard it so many times. Drinking and driving, legalization of marijuana, abortion, gay marriage, and adopting a pet. I've heard that one a lot, okay? Those are ones that I get bored with personally, but I can get on board with pretty much any topic, even potatoes. So, after we know who our audience is, we have to know what is the general purpose. What's the general purpose of giving this speech? There's only three, okay? Every speech will fall under one of these three purposes. To inform, to persuade, or to celebrate and entertain. That's it. Every single speech will be one of those, okay? So if I'm giving an informative speech, then my goal is to inform, right? If I'm giving a persuasive speech, my goal is to persuade the audience to do something, not do something, start something, stop something. If I'm giving a celebratory or a speech to entertain, then that is my goal, to celebrate the occasion, to celebrate the person, or to entertain my audience. So the first speech we give in here is going to be our past, present, future speech, okay? So it's a who am I speech. Past, present, future is my dual credit. It's a who am I speech. The topic is you, but you're sharing anything you want to share about yourself with us. Okay, so you can tell me past, present, future if you want. You could tell me 3 biggest pet peeves, 3 people who've influenced your life, 3 of your top favorite moments you've ever had. I had one student tell me the 3 most embarrassing things that had ever happened to them, and I was like, that's a way to break the ice with your audience, right? So you can share anything you want, but you're informing us about you, okay? The second speech we give in here is an informative speech on any topic that you want. The third speech is the impromptu speech, so you won't know whether it's informative or persuasive until the day of. And then we will do a persuasive group project, okay? We're not going to do any speeches to celebrate or entertain, but those speeches would be things like the valedictory address at high school graduation, a eulogy at a funeral, you're celebrating that person's life, a toast at a wedding, if you accept an award sometime. All of those are speeches to celebrate, entertain, or even sometimes they're called to commemorate, right? So any speech that just highlights an event or a person is going to be to celebrate or entertain. You're not informing us of anything, you're not persuading us of anything. You're just saying, here's some good things about whatever. So once you know your audience, you have to pick your general purpose. So for this first speech, it's to inform. After you know your general purpose, then you can come up with your topic. Okay? Once you know your general purpose, then you can decide, what should my topic be? And usually this is where my students start to like freak out because they're like, but I don't know what to talk about. And I'll say, talk about what's interesting to you. I don't know. I don't have anything. I'm like, you don't know anything interesting to talk about? Okay. Well, I can see how it can get a little bit overwhelming, and so the first thing that you want to do if you are just completely lost on a topic is do some brainstorming, okay? Yes, throw it back to high school, but the way I like to do brainstorming is I like to put down some kind of general, maybe topic. So if I was going to talk about myself, right, I know the first speech is about me, so maybe I put down personal information, professional, hobbies. I could do more general stuff if I wanted. I don't have to, okay? And then I like to set my alarm on my phone and give myself just 1 minute, okay? 1 minute to do some brainstorming. And I might just write down as many things I can think of in 1 minute. And when I'm done with that, okay, so here's what I maybe put down. Family, hometown kids, college career, side jobs, hobbies, I have books. I wrote down I'm a hippie. My husband always calls me a hippie because I'm super into essential oils and crystals and the energy of the moon and all sorts of things, but whatever. And then soccer mom. I'm not really a soccer mom. I'm just like a all sports mom, okay? All the sports. It's not just soccer, okay? So maybe I like those, maybe I don't. If I don't like them, I could cross them all out and I could start over. I could brainstorm as many times as I want to, right? It's taking me 1 minute per time, so it's not a big deal. Maybe I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about past, present, future. And so then maybe I brainstorm to write down what I would talk about with my past, present, future. Or maybe I want to talk about, maybe I did write down pet peeves. Or maybe I did write down inspirational people. Or whatever, okay? I'm just going to do some brainstorming as I come up with topics that maybe I want to share with my audience. Once I kind of pick a topic, then I'm going to do some concept mapping. Again, just like high school English, okay? I'm going to do some concept mapping. Now, actually, after I wrote all these down and did my brainstorming, I'm like, ooh, actually, I want to talk about personal, professional, and hobbies as my 3 main topics. So I actually, decided my general topics would be my points, okay? So I put in my middle of my brainstorm, my concept map into inform. And then from that, I wrote my 3 points. So the first thing I would want to talk about is my family. And then I want to talk about my hobbies, and then I want to talk about my career. Actually, I do family, career, hobbies. It doesn't matter, though. From family, I kind of want to talk about my immediate family, like my mom, dad, my brothers. I would talk about Paul, my husband. I would talk about my kids, okay? In career, I kind of didn't know where I wanted to go here. I could talk about teaching. I could talk about, my history of teaching and online teaching, or I could talk about my experience and then talk about my first experience in teaching, moving to college, and then where I am now. I don't know. The thing is, concept mapping, you just edit and move and mark out and move around. It's just getting your ideas out of your head and onto paper, okay? And then when I went to my hobbies, books, being a hippie, driving my kids everywhere, those are really my hobbies, right? So looking at this, there's kind of the very basis of my outline, but the thing is, I only have 2 to 3 minutes to give this speech, so I don't know that I could get all of that into 3 minutes. I mean, I could talk about each one of those things for 3 minutes. So I like that concept map, but I just don't know that that would actually work for the speech. I think what I would have to do is start writing the speech, start outlining it a little bit, and then from there I'd be like, okay, this is too much or it's not enough, okay? For the most part, when I write a speech, it's too much. It's always too much. But for you, it might not be enough, right? So you just kind of have to figure out how much information is going to fit in the time limit that I have. And here's the thing. Speech writing isn't just a process that you do and it's done. Speech writing is lots of editing and processing and redoing and reevaluating, okay? So it's a lot like any kind of writing, right? Any kind of English writing, any kind of essay. It's just evaluating and redoing and editing. So please don't be scared to edit. A lot of my students think editing means mistakes. No, it doesn't. Editing means I haven't done it perfectly yet, right? That's what I think editing means anyway. Okay, so I kind of came up with my topics. So from there, I need to write now a specific purpose. My general purpose is to inform, and so my specific purpose is going to be what I want my audience to get from my speech. It's the goal that I have for my audience, for my speech. It should be 1 sentence, not a question, okay? And it begins with a general purpose. So it starts with something like this: to inform the audience about different types of jazz music. Okay, that would be an example of it. If you want to get even more specific, you might say to inform the audience about my, I could say self, or about my family, my career, and my hobbies. Okay, because I know those are the 3 things I'm going to talk about. Why do we have to write a specific purpose? Well, as you go through your speech, sometimes it's easy to get lost and be like, what am I talking about again? Like, what am I doing here, right? Because sometimes as you're writing, you get just kind of, you go on a rabbit trail, right? Your mind starts wandering and you're like, well, I'm going to write about this. And you're like, wait, that's not really what we're supposed to be doing here. And so if you have a specific purpose, you can go back to that specific purpose again and again to be like, okay, help me focus back in. What is it that I'm trying to get my audience to know? What's my goal, right? So I think a specific purpose is helpful. The other thing is, if you write a very detailed, specific purpose like this, then that is actually your preview of points. That is actually a part of your speech that we will put in, okay? So we've done 3 steps. We've analyzed our audience. We've come up with our general purpose. Actually, we've done 4. We've created our topic, figured out our topic, and then we've also written our specific purpose. We have not started outlining the speech yet. There's a lot of prep work to speech writing, and I think a lot of students don't understand that. They want to just jump in and do it, right? There's prep work to it, because the more prep work you do, the better your outline is, okay? So now that we know our specific purpose, let's develop our outline, okay? If you've written an outline before, then you know kind of how an outline should work. But in my class, I want a Roman numeral outline, which means that all of your main points, your main things, main topics, will have a Roman numeral, okay? So you'll have Roman numerals for introduction, body, and conclusion. That might be different from your English class. Sometimes in English class, they like the main bodies to have their own Roman numerals, but for me, I want Roman numeral 1 to be the introduction, Roman numeral 2 to be the body, and Roman numeral 3 to be the conclusion. Every single time. That doesn't change, okay? Following your Roman numerals, you will have a different symbol set. It can be 1, 2, 3, or it can be capital A, B, C, D. I don't care. I typically do capital letters and then I move to numbers, but that's just the way I do it. I've looked this up a million times. I've never found that there's a correct way either to go to A first or to 1 first, okay? So I always go A, B, C, D, and then when I indent to my next symbol set, I do 1, 2, 3, okay? Here's the thing about outlines. These symbol sets, they mean things, and so you need to make sure that they're correct, and the indentions also mean things, so you need to make sure that they are correct, okay? So a bunch of writing an outline is just formatting it correctly, which is why I gave you that blank outline on top hat, so you can go in and you can just type after the symbols. That's already created for you, okay? So you have 3 major sections of each outline: introduction, body, and conclusion. And then following that are indentions and separate symbol sets, okay? So once you've created the outline, or you kind of know how your outline should be formatted, you can start writing it, okay? Now, I want to say a caveat here. I personally like to write the body of my speech first and then go back around the introduction and conclusion. You don't have to do it that way. You can write it in whatever order makes most sense to you. If you want to start with the introduction, great. If you want to start with the body, great. If you want to start with the conclusion, fine. I don't care, okay? Whatever makes most sense in your head, do it that way. But for the purposes of today's lecture, I'm going to start with the introduction, okay? So Roman numeral 1 is the introduction, and the first thing in the introduction is going to be A. A is your attention getter. So the first thing you say in your speech is going to be what we call an attention getter. And there are several different ways that you can start your speech. You can start it with a joke or story, okay? If you start with a joke, just be prepared for no one to laugh at you, because there's something about getting up here and saying something funny and everybody's like, I will always give you a courtesy laugh, okay? So I will always laugh. But if everybody else does it, don't let that throw you, okay? Or you can start with a story. I had a student when I was teaching as a teaching assistant at Tech, and he started his Who Am I speech. We did Who Am I speeches there as well. He started it with a story about the events of 9/11. Like, he was like, at 7:30 a.m. this happened, at 8 a.m. this happened, at 8:30 a.m. this happened. It was kind of weird. We were like, where is he going with this? It's supposed to be about himself. And at the end of the story, he said, that day changed my life because that's the day my brother died. And his brother had passed away in 9/11 in one of the flights. And so he told about the person he was today had to do with the fact that he had lost his brother that way. And so it was sad, but it got our attention, right? We really started listening to him. You can start with a hypothetical or a real question, okay? These do not have to be complicated. In fact, it's probably the easiest way to start your speech is with some kind of question. I even did that on the outline that I gave you, right? I just started with a question. It can be real, something you want the students to actually answer, or it can be something hypothetical that you want us to just kind of think about, okay? You can start with statistics or facts, okay? You can tell us a statistic or you can tell us a fact about something. Typically, if you want to start with a statistic or fact, you need to start with something that's a little bit shocking, right? Something that we're like, wait, what? Is that real? That's going to get us listening, okay? Now, it has to obviously be a statistic about something you're going to talk about, okay? You can't just tell me that, like, groundhog's average lifespan is 6 years. And also, let's talk about me, right? Like, it has to flow, okay? It has to fit a little bit. Or you can start with a quote, verse, lyric, something like that, okay? I personally love to start with a quote. That is my favorite way to start a speech. Because there's quotes about everything, right? And it's just an easy, simple way to get my audience kind of with me and thinking about whatever kind of topic I want to talk about, right? So I like to start with a quote, but you don't have to. You can start with any one of those things. What you cannot start with is, hi, my name is, and my topic is. That is the way my students like to start their speeches, but that is not an attention getter. Now, that being said, on the first speech, that actually does make a lot of sense because it's about you, right? So on the first speech, you actually can say, hi, my name is Kelly. That will work as an attention getter. But on any other speech, that is not your attention getter. Your attention getter is not your name, okay? In most speeches, you will be introduced, right? And so there's no need to say your name again. Or if you do say your name, it should come after your attention getter, right? So if I ask the question, who am I? Well, hi, my name is Kelly Finley. And today, I would then move into the rest of my introduction, right? But I'm never going to start with my name or topic, okay? So once I know what attention getter I'm going to say, oh, and here too, the attention getter is what gets the audience's attention. That's why it's called attention getter, right? So I've had students before complain because I won't make people be quiet before they get up here to give their speech. Like if we have a class that's loud, and in a 20-person class it gets louder, right? And it's loud and they're talking and they get up here and they're standing up here. I'm sitting back there with my camera and I'm just waiting to push the button. I don't say, hey, everybody be quiet. Jasmine's about to start talking. I don't say that. I let you command the attention. Because what's the first thing you're supposed to do? Get the audience's attention, right? So that's your job. So I'm telling you now, that's why I don't do it, because that should be what you could do. Okay. After I say my attention getter, B is what we call justification / credibility. I just put them together, okay? So first of all, why are you talking about this? Anytime you give a speech, you need to answer the question, why are you talking about this topic? Okay? Now you could be like, well, because you're making me. Yes, but like, why specifically did you choose those things to share with us? Right? How is this going to help us? And so maybe you say something like, I chose 3 points today that I think will help you get to know me the best in the limited amount of time that I have with you. Okay? Or something like that. And then you don't really, on this who am I speech, you don't actually have to have a credibility statement. A credibility statement is, why should I listen to you talk about this topic? What do you know about it, right? Obviously, when you're talking about yourself, you don't need a credibility statement. There is no one more credible to talk about you than you, right? But on every other speech, if you're going to get up here and give an informative speech about Mount Kilimanjaro, why do I need to listen to you? What have you done that's going to make you someone credible? So maybe you tell me, I've done a lot of research on Mount Kilimanjaro, or maybe you say it's always fascinated me since I was a child and so I know a lot about it. Or maybe you say something like, I had a cousin that decided to go and visit, and that was one of the most amazing things they'd ever seen, and they came back and told us about it, and I've always wanted to go back and see it since then, or something like that. You're just giving me a statement about why you're credible to talk about this topic, okay? And that's going to be B. So you're going to justify why you chose the topic and then tell me why you're credible to talk about it. C is going to be your thesis. So your thesis is your goal. What are you wanting the audience to get? Okay? So, if you did a kind of a general, specific statement up here, you might say, my goal today is to inform you about myself. Right? Or today, I hope that I inform you more about myself. Now, here's the thing. I personally think a thesis statement and a preview of points is basically the same thing. But my colleagues teach it separately. Okay, so I also teach it separately, but here, if you give your speech and you don't have a thesis, but you have a really awesome preview of points, that's all I care about. The preview of points to me is the most important part of the introduction. So the thesis is the goal, but then like, I'm going to say the preview points. So the preview points would be to inform you about me. I'm going to share with you about my family, my career, and my hobbies. Okay, so you see how the thesis and the preview points could be very similar. Okay, so we teach them as different things, but for me, the preview points is basically what the thesis is anyway. Okay, because that's the goal. That's what you're trying to get us to know. All right, so C would be your thesis. What are you wanting us to get from the speech? And then D is what exact points are you going to share with us today? Okay, that's the difference. One's the goal and one is these are the exact points you will hear in my speech. Now, here's where my students start to be like, wait, but why? Like, I'm literally going to start the speech. The next thing I say, why am I going to tell them what I'm going to say in the speech? Well, in the speech world, we say, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Your audience doesn't listen to you, right? Think about how long in the 37 minutes we've been in class you've already zoned out today. It's not bad, it's the way our brains work. We just can't stay with people that long. And so your job as a speaker is to make sure that they've heard at least once what you've said. So you're going to say it 3 times. You're going to say it in your introduction, you're going to say it in your body, and you're going to say it in your conclusion. And you're going to hope that they heard one of those 3. Okay? So that's why you're going to preview your points here. So every time you write an introduction, you're going to have these 4 parts. Attention getter, justification, credibility, thesis statement, preview points, every single time. That is how you write the introduction. Okay? Y'all know I love The Princess Bride. It's a little bit of a stretch, okay, but I kind of love it, right? Attention getter, credibility, justification, here's why I'm going to tell you this, and thesis, here's what's going to happen. Prepare to die. All right, then we move to the body. So the body is Roman numeral 2, and your first point is going to be A or 1, whichever one you do, okay? You're going to start each main body point with the first S, okay? Every main body point is going to follow the 4S structure. The 4S structure is signpost, state, support, and summary. Every main body point is going to have those 4 S's in it, okay? The first S is signpost. So signposting is using words that are transition words. Words like first, to begin with. My first point is. Okay? You want to make sure that your audience knows where you are in the speech. And so if you say, my first point is, the first thing I'd like to talk about. First, or let's begin with. Some kind of word that tells us, hey, we're in the first point. That's your signpost. Okay? So here is my signpost word. Then I'm going to follow that signpost with a statement. That statement is the first point I'm going to talk about. Let me share about my family. Do you know what point I'm on? The first point. And do you know what I'm going to talk about in this point? My family. Right? The third S are the support. So this is the information that you're going to give me inside the outline. On here, up on the board, I just wrote keyword, key phrase, but on your outline that you turn into me, it does need to be in full sentences, like the sheet that I gave you, okay? So I might say on my outline, I'm going to share about my mom, dad, and brothers. I'm going to share about my husband. I'm going to share about my kids. Yes, those are complete sentences. Do they have much information in them? No. Your outline is the skeleton, right? It is not the speech. It's the skeleton. It's the preparation. Do I need to write down everything I would say about my mom, dad, and brothers? No, I don't need to do that. But I do need to know what I would want to share when I practice it so I don't go over time, right? So I might say, I have a mom, a dad, I have 2 brothers. My dad is a farmer. He's always been a farmer. Kind of a hard life being a farmer, right? My mom did not work outside the home until I graduated from high school. Then the year after I graduated, she decided to get a job and she became the high school secretary at the school where I graduated from. Also, she said it was because my brothers never told her anything, so she needed to figure out what's going on. So she became the high school secretary. She worked there for, I want to say 12 years, and now she's actually the secretary here in this building. So I call her my secretary, but not really because I don't want her to hit me, right? And then I have 2 younger brothers. Joel is 2 years younger than me. He is an assistant U.S. attorney in Corpus Christi. He's married. He has 8 children. I know. And then my youngest brother, Chase, is actually the director of youth student relations here at South Plains College. He's married and has 3 kids. So that might be all I share about that because I just don't have a ton of time, right? Those are my supports. Now, then I have a summary sentence. The very last S in my point is a summary sentence. So here's the thing. I don't need you to necessarily put the summary sentence on the outline, but if you're going to not remember to say it unless it's on the outline, write it on there, okay? So the summary sentence is literally a sentence that summarizes what I just said. Now you know a little bit more about my family. Why? Because your audience doesn't listen to you. You need to tell them multiple times, okay? Then we move to our second point, and we're going to start the 4S structure all over again. Secondly, I would like to share with you about my career. Okay, that's my signpost and my statement. Then I would have 2 to 3 supports, okay? Anytime you write a main point, you're going to have between 2 and 5 supports. Anytime, okay? Anytime you write a speech, you're going to have between 2 and 5 main body points. Anytime. If it's less than 2, you don't actually have a speech. And if it's more than 5, I'm sorry, no one is going to stay with you. It doesn't matter how long the speech is. If the speech is an hour long, you still shouldn't have over 5 points. If the speech was 5 hours long, you shouldn't have over 5 main points because no one can stay with you past 5, okay? So your supports, you can have 2 to 5 supports, and your main points, you can have 2 to 5 main points. On this very first speech, I make you have 3 main points. That's a requirement of the speech. But after that, you can choose however many main points you want to have in your speeches, okay? So then I would say some supports about my career. I am a college teacher, but I started teaching actually in junior high and high school. I taught for 4 years at Whiteface High School. In middle school and high school, I taught speech, I taught English, I taught like art, something. I was a cheer sponsor, I was a junior class sponsor, I was all the things, okay? Teaching in a little school is a lot of work, and I enjoyed it, I really did, but my dream was to teach at South Plains College, so a job came up, I applied, I got an interview, I interviewed, it was like the best interview of my life, you guys, and I did not get the job, and I was so sad, and I cried, and then they called me, and they're like, well, do you want to adjunct teach for us? And I was like, no, but yes, right? Like, I don't want to do it because I just had a new baby. Keely was brand new, spanking brand new. And they were like, well, we'd love for you to teach our summer classes. And I was like, okay. So I left my newborn with her dad, and then I came to work, right? And then they're like, well, you want to teach a night class in the fall? I'm like, no, yes. Right? So every week, my mom or my mother-in-law, because my husband was a football coach at that time, my mother, who lived in Bledsoe, Texas, so 75 miles from Lubbock, would drive to my house to keep my baby. Or my mother-in-law, who lived in Plainview, would drive to my house to keep my baby. They switched off while I adjunct taught. And then at the end of that semester, they said, hey, we have another job. Do you want it? And I was like, finally, yes. Okay? That started my college career, and now I've been teaching here for 9 years. I teach face-to-face, I teach online, which is not my favorite, but it is necessary, right? And so I've been teaching dual credit for like 3 years now, which is like going back to junior high and high school, but not really, kind of. It's different. Anyway, okay? That's kind of my teaching career, but this is my dream job. So when anybody asks me like, what's your dream job? I say, I already have it, because I do. This is exactly what I want to do with my life. Am I ever going to become a millionaire? Doubtful. Okay? But I live happily, I'm fine, This is literally my dream job. No questions. Okay, then I'd have a summary sentence. Now you know a little bit about my career. Then I would move to my third point. I would say a signpost, third, or finally, or my last point is my hobbies. Okay, that's my statement. Then I would give my supports. I have, 3 hobbies, I guess. I love to read, I love to read. I love to read so much that sometimes I don't read because there's too many things I want to read and I don't know what to do. Also, sometimes I don't read because when I read, I like to read and I don't like to be interrupted. And I have 3 children, 10 and under. I am interrupted often. So, or I'll stay up till 4 in the morning to read and I can't do that because I'm old now and I need my sleep. Right? But I do love books. I love all different genres. Here's the thing, I don't like sad books though. People are always like, oh my gosh, you gotta read this, it's so amazing. I mean, I cried my eyes out, but it was amazing. No, off the table. Life is sad. I don't need to read books about other sad things. Secondly, my husband calls me a hippie. I am super into essential oils and I believe in their healing properties and I'm kind of into crystals and I believe in the energy of the moon. I'm super into things like Reiki and like manifesting your destiny and like giving the universe what it is that you need. Obviously from a Christian standpoint because I am a Christian, but I believe all that thing, I don't know, it all works together somehow.
And
So,
she's thought that most of her life probably because you did it whenever we were in college.
he knows about my angsty college life because we went to college together.
Yep.
Yeah, I was a total angsty college student. I wrote a lot of poetry, stayed up really late, smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, because that's what we did. Anyway, I don't smoke now, though. And then finally, my last hobby is really just taking my kids wherever they need to go. I have 3 kids. They go all to gymnastics. 2 of them are about to start basketball, and then I have 2 that love to play soccer, and then their dad's a coach too, so we also go to a lot of sports games that are not theirs. So, it's busy. Then I say my summary sentence. Now you know a little bit about my hobbies. Okay? Then we move to our conclusion. That's our main body. So in our conclusion, the first thing we do is we restate our points. What? We just told them. Yes, tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Why? They don't listen. Very good. They don't listen to you. Okay? So you're going to tell them again. So you're going to have a signpost. In conclusion, okay? You can use something else. You can say to end or to wrap up or finally, but I don't ever get fancy with it. I always say in conclusion. So in conclusion, you now know more about my family, my career, and my hobbies. Okay? I'm always going to do it in the same order, and I'm always going to try to say it very similarly, okay? Very close to the same way. If you were in English class, they'd be like, oh, this is kind of dull, right? But in speech class, we like to hear those things that are repetitive. When we hear repetition, it helps us remember. So I'm going to repeat words as often as I can, okay? Without repeating the same material, right? Not the same supports, but the main parts I'm going to repeat. B, I'm going to restate the thesis. So basically, when I was in high school, my English teacher used to say, your introduction starts broad and it ends specific. And your conclusion starts specific and it ends broadly. So basically, that's what we're doing here, too. Your conclusion is kind of your introduction flipped over, all right? So in conclusion, A is going to be your review of points. B is going to be restating the thesis. Now that you know those things, hopefully you feel like you've gotten to know me a little bit better. C is going to be your call to action. All right, here is where, if you've read chapter 3, you realize my colleague and I do not agree. Okay, I believe every single speech should have a call to action. Every single one. My colleague says, but if you give every single speech a call to action, then you've made every single speech persuasive. And to that I say, not necessarily, but also, isn't every speech persuasive really anyway? Like, if you're not telling me what to do with the information, what am I going to do with the information?
Throw it away.
Nothing. Throw it away. Let it go, right? So you're just going to leave. So I'm going to tell my audience what I want them to do with the information I've given them. That's what my call to action is. Obviously, it's easier in the persuasive speech because there's something you were trying to persuade us to do. In the informative speech, it is a little bit difficult, but what do you want me to do with this information? So maybe you say, you know, now if you see me in the hallways, you'll know a little bit more about me, you'll feel more like we're friends. Or now that we're going to spend the next 12 weeks together, hopefully you feel like you know who I am a little bit better. Okay, so you're just going to tell me, this is what I wanted you to do with the information. I just wanted you to get to know me a little bit. That's why I gave you that information. And then D is a closing statement. Whatever you used for a memorable ending, you can also use for your closing. Okay, so it could be a joke or story, it could be a statistic or fact, it could be a quote or verse or lyric, it could be a question. Okay, any way that you begin your speech, you can also end your speech. It doesn't have to be the same way. Like if you start with a quote, you don't have to end with a quote. You could end with a statistic, right? If you started with a story, maybe you decide to end with a fact. Okay, you don't have to end it the same way. But if you do, if you start with a quote and end with a quote, that's called a bookend. Okay? I think that might be an exam question. If you start and end your speech the exact same way, it's called a bookend. Okay? What I don't want to hear at the end of your speech is, well, I guess I'm done. Well, I'm finished. Or, yep, that's all I got. Or I'm through, right? Like we want to have a good, strong, I obviously know that was the end of the speech. Okay? And a lot of people get really nervous, like they don't want to be up here, but also once they're up here, they don't know how to leave. So you want to have that really strong, closing, memorable sentence, ending, or thought. And then if you still are nervous and don't know what to say, you can always say thank you and walk away. Okay? Like, thank you and it's over. But I don't want you to be like, and that's all I have to say, sitting down, right? Like you're running off, I don't want to say the stage, but the stage, right? That is how you write an outline. Every single time your speech will follow this outline format. So really the only thing that changes is the content, but the formatting, the organization of it does not change. You're always going to have those 4 things in the introduction, you're always going to use the 4S structure in the body, and you're always going to have those 4 things in the conclusion every single time. Okay? So let me show you, this is just an example from one of my students. And this was a persuasive speech, but so I labeled it with some color coding so you could see it. So, attention getter. Why do we give our animals more rights than our children? I'm sorry, what? If I heard that as my attention getter, it would stop me in my tracks because I want to hear what she's talking about. She moves through justification. We wait 6 weeks before ever thinking of injecting puppies or kittens with the vaccination in order to protect them from harm. Why are we letting our children get injected with potentially harmful chemicals before they're 24 hours old? Okay. She starts her justification with a question, and I'm okay with that, right? Like, why are we doing this? Oh, that's interesting. Are you going to tell me? Now, she does not up here write her credibility. Okay, and that's going to be important for the speech. But in the speech, she told us that her littlest brother was vaccine injured, and that was why it was a big deal for their family. They were very passionate about it. So then she moves into a thesis. These vaccines contain mercury that are harming our children, and then preview points. Mercury should be taken out of vaccinations because it's a neurotoxin that leads to autism in some children. It's only used as a preservative, and at the very least should be postponed until babies are old enough to be medically evaluated. Do we know what point she's going to cover? Yes. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through each of the things, but she has signpost, statement, and then she has her supports, signpost, statement, supports. Now, she doesn't have summary sentences up here. You don't have to put them on your outline. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to, okay? You do need to say them out loud in the speech. Another thing she does, she has her sources listed, but obviously that's incorrect formatting. I want you to do APA or MLA, whichever you're more comfortable with. So you can't just write source 1, source 2, source 3, because I'm not going to know on your bibliography what source 1 unless you do it in the right order, but then it's not probably going to be alphabetical, so that's going to be incorrect as well. Okay, so her in-text citation is incorrect. Okay, and then we move to the conclusion. Another signpost restates her thesis, or restates her points. That should be restatement of points. Restates her thesis. Call to action. I believe every parent should do exhaustive research before allowing anyone to vaccinate their newborn baby. Closing. According to the Autism Speaks website, autism now affects 1 in every 57 children and 1 in every 37 boys. There must be something that's contributing to this. If it's not completely from vaccinations, they cannot possibly be helping our children. Okay? So that's her ending here. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree with her speech, which you don't have to, The outlining of it's pretty good, okay? She uses complete sentences, she has all of her parts. I don't like the way she does her sources, because if this is her bibliography, it is in alphabetical order, so then that means I don't know which one is source 1, source 2, source 3. Now, if you are talking about something this controversial that has a lot of stuff behind it, you are going to need to cite your sources, like a lot, okay? She did have quite a few sources. On the first speech, obviously, about yourself, there are no sources that need to be cited, because we don't need those. And I haven't taught those to you anyway. I will teach you source citation, okay? How to find them, how to cite them, what we're looking for. All right, questions about creating your outline. It's kind of a lot of information, okay? But you're smart. You can do it. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, once you create your outline, then you are going to create a speaking outline. The outline that you turn into me, that full sentence, pretty outline that we just did together, you're going to print that out and you're going to hand it to me on speech day. And I'm going to use it to follow along with you. I'm going to use it for a couple reasons. 1, did you do the outline? 2, if you get lost, I have a place to say, hey, I think you're going to talk about this next, right? So you're going to hand me a printed, typed, full sentence outline on speech day. It's the only thing I do not require you to turn into top hat. So one thing I want you to bring to class on speech day, okay? It's worth 10 points. So if you don't have one, it's not going to kill your speech. But if you don't have one, you're not going to make an A either. Okay, so that's kind of where the outline falls on our grading. But that's not what you get to use to give your speech. You don't get this pretty full sentence outline that you wrote. You are going to create speaker notes. I never get to drink my coffee when I have my mask on, and I'm sad because I've got all this coffee in it and I got to drink it. Okay, so a speaker note, what I want is for you to use a note card, something like this, front and back, okay? I don't want you to write your speech word for word on your note card. When you do that, then you read it, and then it becomes a manuscript speech, okay? So I want you to have keyword, key phrase. You're still going to use the same symbol sets as you would in your outline, but you're not going to have all of the information, okay? When you write your speaker notes, they should look something like this, okay? So she's got her Roman numerals. You see where introduction, body, conclusion is, right? She even did some highlighting for her signposts because she didn't want to forget those, because your signposts are actually really important. They're worth 5 points a piece, those little words, okay? So it might look something like this. You just don't want full sentences, because when you write full sentences, you say full sentences, and when you say full sentences, you start to read it, and then that's boring, okay? We don't want you to have a boring speech. So it should look something like this. It could be different, like she did little boxes, but like if you didn't want to do that, you could just do columns or something, okay? So that's kind of a good look at what like a note card would look like, right? You're writing your symbol sets, you're including entire source citations if you need it, and then one thing that I would tell you to do is also to number the note cards. So if you used front and back, just even in the corner write a 1 and then a 2, right? Because you're going to get up here, you're going to get a little bit nervous, and you want everything to be able to be easily found on your note card, okay? What we don't want are these speaker notes, okay? I always have 1 or 2 students who are like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my outline, and I'm going to tap it out, and I'm going to make it real small, and then I'm going to tape it to my note cards, front and back, right? So I always give you, like if your note cards look like this is incorrect. That's too many words, okay? Too many words. I always give you a note card limit. So like on the first speech, I don't want you to use more than 1 note card, okay? That's the limit that I don't want you to do, okay? I don't want your note cards to look like this. This speech was 10 minutes, you guys. 10 minutes of reading. I didn't even pay attention the whole time. I got bored, right? You don't want your audience to get bored. So I always give you a note card limit, but I don't really grade on your note cards. Okay? I require that you turn them in, and I put them with your speech, but I don't really grade on them. I just use them if I get lost or if I needed to see something, I'll go back and look at them. But I don't really grade on them, so if you wanted to use 2 note cards on your first speech, you could. But here's the thing. I give you limits so that you don't get carried away with how much you write on them, okay? And because the more note cards you have, the easier it is for you to get lost in your note cards. And I don't want you to get lost in your note cards, okay? So one time I had a student who came in for his first speech, he had 10 note cards, front and back. They weren't like written out, they were just like one sentence per front, one sentence per back. I'm like, why did you do that? And he was like, well, I can't read my writing if it's too small. I was like, what? Okay, but that's like a lot of 10 is a lot of note cards, because then that means you have 20 sides, right? I was like, if you get up there and you drop them, it's going to take a while to find your place looking through 10 note cards front and back. He was like, I'm not going to drop them. But then Karma kind of smiled upon me, and guess what he did when he got up here? He dropped them. And then he's already nervous, right? Everyone's up here, they're nervous. We understand that. But then he's trying to pick up his note cards and find his place, and he's having to look at the front and back of 10 note cards while we're all staring at him. And that's harder, right? Like you're under this pressure. And that is why I give you a limit, because the more note cards you have, the easier it is to get lost in them, okay? And we're only wanting keyword, key phrase. So like what I would write on my note card is maybe this right here. I might write out my entire signpost and statement. But then for my supports, I would just have quickly something about those. Oh, I didn't tell you all about my husband and kids. Whatever, they're fun. I like them. Okay, let's skip all that. Oopsie. So number them and highlight them. Okay. Questions about the outline? Okay. So if you looked at Top Hat, you have a rough draft outline due tonight. Okay. I don't actually need it tonight for y'all, okay? That's really for my Wednesday class, because remember last Wednesday I did this exact lecture, right? So I actually don't need your outline tonight. I do need it